everybody. Welcome back to Neighborhood News Studio. Today is September the 15th, and we would like to first apologize for such a long hiatus. Like life gets to you, and you have to put priorities first. And we couldn't put Neighborhood News Hour first, but we're trying to get back in the groove of it. But there's a couple things I want to cover. We're going to talk about Biden, blood, and a couple political things, and maybe everybody's favorite Andy can join us later. But we're going to start today with a video from Biden. When he first was elected, he talks a lot about unity.
I said at the outset, I wanted to represent this campaign to represent and look like America. We've done that. Now that's what I want the administration to look like and act like. For all those of you who voted for President Trump, I understand the disappointment tonight. I've lost a couple times myself, but now let's give each other a chance.
Give each other a chance. Republicans and Democrats work together.
Put away the harsh rhetoric, lower the temperature, see each other again, listen to each other again. And to make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as our enemies. They are not our enemies. They are Americans. They're Americans.
You heard it there, straight from Biden. And this was in November 2020. Now, in September 2022, there was another report from there was a recent speech he gave. And his wording was a little, harsh himself. We'll let you hear that.
Returning to where American democracy was forged long ago, President Biden with a call to action to protect the freedoms he says face real jeopardy.
I'm asking our nation to come together, unite behind the single purpose of defending our democracy regardless of your ideology.
While touting the strength of the soul of the nation, he warned about extremes in the Republican Party.
Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundation.
That's some harsh language right there.
Of our republic.
Harsh rhetoric.
10 weeks before the midterm elections,
unity?
The White House insisted the president's message was not a campaign event.
No, it's not a political speech.
But House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy headed to the president's hometown of Scranton to demand Mr. Biden apologize for criticizing Trump voters.
President Biden
I thought we were all Americans.
Demean and disparage his fellow Americans.
Citing President Biden's record on crime, inflation, and immigration, McCarthy made a direct pitch for Republicans to take over control of Congress.
We must change direction in Washington before it is too late.
In this political season, defending democracy is a fight in itself.
It may already be too late with the way the elections are going. I was going to do this later, but we'll skip right to it since they're talking about elections. Because our good friend Harry the Greek released a story about how 3 million voter registrations were fraudulent. Three million fraudulent voter registrations found in the New York election audit. And this was done by Audit New York. Visit their website. It says here, the number could be as high as 8 million, according to Marley Hornick of New York Citizens Voter Audit. She said another 5 million voter registrations have been flagged and are being investigated. Invalid registrations are used to assign phony mail-in ballots through secret programming in the voter rolls. The code is cracked. The spell is broken. And what they have been doing in New York is laid bare for everyone to see, said Hornick. These results would invalidate 30% of the New York state legislature and the laws they have passed. Also, auditors have submitted 321,000 identity theft cases. So we'll see what comes of that. This is big news. It says many of these false registrations have been assigned votes, completing the theft. Who are the gatekeepers responsible for this vote registration fraud? The usual suspects: Hillary Clinton's lawyer, Mark Elias, and the U.S. Postal Service. It says in order to reelect one party Congress, Hillary needs armed police to transport mail-in drop boxes to election boards to fix the November 8th election. And there's actually a video of them recruiting new police for the post office. Let's have a see.
If you are interested in working for the United States Postal Inspection Service as a postal police officer, we are hiring. Positions are available in these locations: Memphis, Tennessee, Boston, Massachusetts, St. Louis, Missouri, Detroit, Michigan, Fort Worth, Texas.
That's some job
Houston,
creation.
Texas,
Go become the police
San Juan,
officer.
Puerto Rico, New York, New
God
York,
knows our elections are
Philadelphia,
insecure.
Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Cleveland, Ohio, San Francisco, California, Washington, D.C., and Baltimore, Maryland. For details, visit uspis.gov. The application portal opens August 29th, 2022.
So they just started hiring. And we'll get back to that story. It says enforced by martial law, according to the Pentagon, who announced last month that they are in control of the November general election, according to U.S. Army General Paul M. Nakasone. He is commander of Cybercom and director of NSA/chief of the Central Security Service. The government said this is a whole of government effort. And it's got a press release. Visit newsothersmiss.com if you want to get all the source material. But we're gonna get back to Biden. So since we're talking about voting, the president recently went to vote in Delaware, and he was asked a few questions. And this was on the 13th, so about 2 days ago. Mr. President, can you come talk to us about the railroad negotiations? No, says Mr. President. Question, Mr. President, is this a turning point in the war in Ukraine? Biden, the question is unanswerable right now. It's hard to tell. It's clear that the Ukrainians have made significant progress, but I think it's going to be a long haul. Question again, Mr. President, can you tell us about the inflation report numbers today and the resulted dive in the stock market? Answer, the stock market doesn't necessarily reflect the state of the economy, which is true. And the economy is still strong. Unemployment is low, jobs are up, manufacturing is good. So I think we're going to be fine. Question, are you worried about the inflation number though, sir? President, no, I'm not, because we're talking about 0.1%. And anyway, thank you. So much for straight answers on any of those questions. And there was another statement from the White House briefing room about inflation. From Biden, today's data shows more progress in bringing global inflation down in the U.S. economy. Overall, prices have been essentially flat in our country these last 2 months, which is not really true. That is welcome news for American families. With more work still to do, gas prices are down on average $1.30 a gallon since the beginning of the summer. This month, we saw some prices increases slow from the month before at the grocery store, and real wages went up again for a second month in a row. I wonder who that really accounts for. I mean, most people don't see their wages increase, giving hardworking families a little breathing room. And he was mentioning that inflation was low, but we all know they go by the U3 total employment, which ignores a lot of the workforce. And it says it's 3.7%. But if you look at the U6, which includes persons marginally attached to labor force who are neither working nor looking for work, but indicate that they want and are available for a job and have looked for work somewhere in the past 12 months. And if you add in all those people, it's up to 7% for August, as of August. And even if he says that gas went down $1.30 on average, it still says it's about $4, which we all know is historically crazy. Gas was $1 at one point. And right now, regular is about $4 average, 4.20, 4.21 if you round up. And diesel is $5. So that affects inflation for everything. Anything that's going to be on the roads, or even the ships. Alcohol prices remained about the same. It's up a little bit. Potato chips are up. Coffee's up over $1 since last year. Basically, everything's up. We all know this. We all go shop and see that our dollars don't go as far. But it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. Because there's ways that you can help prepare in case of things. Because, supposedly there's a lot of crises. They say weather crises and food crises, health crises. They haven't said heart disease crises, but there is a cancer crisis. But as far as food, there's things you can do to prepare. And one thing I like is canning. I don't know if you've ever eaten anything that's been canned for a couple of months, but especially like peaches. It's very tasty. So it's just something you could consider. So look at this right quick.
Have you ever eaten
as a
fruits,
solution
vegetables, or meat from
going
a tin
forward.
can? Chances are you have. For centuries, canned
Anybody
food
can
has
buy
been a
fruit
popular
and,
method for
you know,
preserving food, both
get
commercially
the
and at home.
the
In
jars
recent
and stuff. If
studies,
you can
canned
get the
food
money,
consumption
you
was
can borrow
positively
jars,
associated
whatever.
with
We
higher
have a
nutrient
community
intakes in
effort.
the U.S. population, demonstrating that canning food is a practical way to prolong the shelf life of food without sacrificing its nutritional value. But how did this process first come about? People have been utilizing food preservation techniques for centuries to extend the storage life of their meals. Drying food in the sun,
Also,
curing it
this
with salt,
video
and
is
pickling
courtesy
it
of
in
Nat
vinegar are
Ria,
some of the
who has
oldest methods
basically
of food
no
preservation.
subscribers.
These methods, however, are still prone to spoilage and significantly alter the taste and texture of most foods. It wasn't until the late 18th century that the process we now know as canning was developed, allowing food to be preserved for great lengths of time while keeping the food in a near fresh state. In 1795, Napoleon Bonaparte was set on his quest to conquer the world. As French troops invaded neighboring countries, the government realized the ability to carry food for an extended time was the key to the health of their soldiers, and thus the key to their military success. Their cured meat provisions weren't cutting it. The government offered a prize of 12,000 francs to the creator of a new, practical means of transporting and storing food. Enter Nicolas Appert, a French chef and grocer who believed that older preservation techniques like curing and pickling spoiled the taste and healthfulness of food. He set out to devise a better process and win the government's contest, and came up with a technique that changed the diet of people worldwide. Appert was born in the east of France on November 17, 1749, to a family of innkeepers and farmers. He learned how to pickle foods and cork champagne bottles at a fairly young age, and later opened a candy and grocery shop in Paris. In 1795, Appert began experimenting with preservation techniques to extend the availability of food beyond its harvest season. Through trial and error, he determined a successful method for prolonging the shelf life of food. Appert used glass jars for his storage process, but he created the process that we now know today as canning. He filled glass bottles with prepared food such as soups, vegetables, juices, dairy products, jellies, jams, and syrups, making sure to leave room at the top of the jar for expansion. He then firmly sealed the jars with cork and wax and placed them into a bath of boiling water. Appert based his preservation process on heating foods to temperatures in excess of 100 degrees Celsius, doing so by using an early version of an autoclave, a device that uses steam, high temperature, and extreme pressure to sterilize. Though somewhat unsure of the scientific principle behind his preservation technique, Appert hypothesized that heat destroys, or at least neutralizes, the fermentation that changes the quality of animal and vegetable substances. Half a century later, Louis Pasteur credited Appert with being the first to understand the basic principle of pasteurization, heating foods to deactivate microorganisms in food that contribute to spoilage. As well as destroying unwanted microorganisms, the heating process of canning drives air out of the jar and forms a vacuum seal as the jar and its contents cool. The vacuum seal also helps to keep the canned foods fresh, as oxygen exposure causes food to ripen. The lack of air in the jars also prevents the growth of mold and slows bacteria propagation. Determined to win the government's prize, Appert opened the world's first canning factory in 1804 in the French town of Massy, south of Paris. In 1809, he succeeded in preserving foods using his boiling and sealing technique. He presented his findings to the French government, demonstrating that this process would allow for easy transportation of food as well as keeping the food from spoiling for extended periods of time, provided the seals were not broken. In 1810, Appert published a book describing his process entitled The Art of Preserving All Kinds of Animal and Vegetable Substances for several years. Upon its publication, the French government presented him with the 12,000 franc award. For his findings, he won a gold medal from the Society for the Encouragement of National Industry. Appert's method was a hit, but glass bottles posed a problem because they were fragile. Later in 1810, Peter Durand patented metal containers, cans, that increased the portability of food for militaries. Dr. J.A. Henry, a professor of nutrition at Oxford Brookes University, noted that, for the first time, you have ships going on long voyages of discovery or on campaigns to far-from-home ports without the ever-present fear of malnutrition. From this point onwards, the incidence of scurvy begins to fall. Once Robert Yates invented the can opener in 1855, tin can mass production took off, and canned goods began moving from just military provisions into the diet of working-class citizens. Canning forever shifted the diet of people across the globe for the better, allowing a wide group of people access to nutrient-rich foods no matter what was in season. The Appert method was so simple and workable that people around the world began adopting his canning and preserving method at home. Still today, people's diets around the world are improved through both the at-home and commercial use of Appert's canning technique.
Well, there you have it. And thank you, Nat Ria. So now we're going to move on to something different. Because we're talking about inflation and food prices and such. But Biden recently released a statement about cancer moonshot. And for those of you who do not know what that is, from cancer.gov, Cancer Moonshot. Since the initial launch of Cancer Moonshot in 2016, the cancer community has made measurable progress towards three ambitious goals: to accelerate scientific discovery in cancer, foster greater collaboration. They've certainly done that, and improve the sharing of cancer data. Early in 2002, President Biden announced the reignition of the cancer moonshot, highlighting new goals to reduce the cancer death rate by half within 25 years and improve the lives of people with cancer and cancer survivors. And to go further, we'll read a little bit from his statement, because he was, for context, he was mentioning about Kennedy's unwillingness to post. I'll go back a little bit. It says, and in choosing to go to the moon, President Kennedy said America was doing so, quote, not because it was easy, but because it was hard, because the goal would serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are willing not, one we are willing to postpone, and one which we intend to win. Unwilling to postpone, President Kennedy, quote unquote, unwilling to postpone. President Kennedy set a goal to win the space race against Russia and advance science and technology for all of humanity. And when he set that goal, he established a national purpose that could rally the American people in a common cause. And he succeeded. And I believe we can usher in the same unwillingness to postpone, the same national purpose that will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills to end cancer as we know it, and even cure cancers once and for all. I give you my word as a Biden, as much as that's worth. This cancer moonshot is one of the reasons why I ran for president. It's part of my unity agenda that I laid out in my State of the Union address to rally the American people to work together, which we just referenced. And you see that he's gone against that already by going against anybody who voted against him. Anyway, because we know this, cancer does not discriminate red and blue. It does not care if you're Republican or Democrat. And the part I wanted to read, it says right here, says the goal is to cut cancer death rates by at least 50% in the next 25 years, to turn more cancers from death sentences into chronic diseases people can live with. Now, why would you want to turn cancer into a chronic disease, and how would you go about doing that? To create a more supportive experience for our patients and families, and to update our fight against cancer. So he's taking this cancer initiative really seriously. So this moves to our next topic, which is blood. Because, you know, a lot of the fight of cancer has to do with blood. So we're going to give a couple of facts on blood from oneblood.org. What is blood? Blood is essential to life, and it belongs to God. That was added by me. Blood circulates through our body and delivers essential substances like oxygen and nutrients to the body's cells, which is why it needs to be clean. It also transports metabolic waste products away from those same cells. There is no substitute for blood. It cannot be made or manufactured, or so they thought. Generous blood donors are the only source of blood for patients in need of blood transfusion. There are 4 components: plasma, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Little cute animation. Red blood cells represent 40 to 45% of your blood volume. They are generated from your bone marrow at a rate of 4 to 5 billion per hour, and they have a life cycle of about 120 days inside the body. Platelets are an amazing part. Platelets are the smallest of our blood cells and literally look like small plates in their non-active form. Platelets control bleeding. Whenever a wound occurs, the blood vessel will send out a signal. Platelets receive that signal and travel to the area and transform it into their active formation, growing long tentacles to make contact with the vessel and form clusters to plug the wound until it heals. Plasma is the liquid portion of your blood. Plasma is yellowish in color and is made up mostly of water. but it also contains proteins, sugars, hormones, and salts. It transports water and nutrients to your body's tissues. And we know about our white blood cells. Although white blood cells, leukocytes, only account for 1% of our blood, they are very important. White blood cells are essential for good health and protection against illness and disease or dis-ease. Like red blood cells, they are constantly being generated from your bone marrow. They follow through the bloodstream and attack foreign bodies like viruses and bacteria. They can even leave the bloodstream to extend the fight into tissue. So as you can see, blood is life, so you best take care of it. And just a little more information about blood types. You can see AB negative is the most rare. We know O negative, that's the monkey blood. I mean, O positive is the monkey blood, right? I can't remember. But O negative is the most important as far as blood donation because they can donate to anybody. But AB positive can only donate to AB positive and AB negative. So blood types are important. And this comes in play when you need marrow transplants and blood transfusions and all that good stuff. And feel free to go to oneblood.org if you would like to look at these charts more in detail. And there's one more from One Blood. It says why blood is needed. The reason to donate is simple. It helps save lives and also contributes to scientific research, obviously. In fact, every 2 seconds of every day, someone needs blood. Actually, every second of every day, we all need our blood. Since blood cannot be manufactured outside of the body, or at least they thought, and has a limited shelf life, they're working on that too. The supply must constantly be replenished by generous blood donors. And there are many reasons patients need blood. A common misunderstanding about blood usage is the accident victims are the patients who use the most blood. Actually, people needing the most blood include those first on the list, cancer treatment, or undergoing orthopedic surgeries, undergoing cardiovascular surgeries, or being treated for inherited blood disorders. So these are the top people that need your blood. And I read somewhere that it was like 37% of the world's blood supply comes from America, but only 1% of us give blood. I personally have never given blood. I've always been scared of needles. And to combat this problem because I believe that there was a talk of a blood shortage last year, but long ago, around 14 years ago, they started to work on a solution for this, and it's called blood farming. In 2008, the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, whose previous projects have yielded technologies such as internet stealth technology and miniaturized GPS, launched its blood farming program and called for scientists and clinicians to create a system to manufacture red blood cells for transfusion. Red blood cells are the most transfused blood product in the battlefield, trauma care, and in civilian clinical settings. So they put millions or billions into creating manufactured blood. And why would they want this blood? Is it just to cure cancer patients? Of course not. For those of you who may not know, that there's an initiative to create a cyborg soldier by 2050. Now, there's no voiceover for this. But basically, this video was just showing you something they dream about with soldiers, which is fully integrated body suits and connected to drones or everything connected, to their command center or however they frame it. But everything will be connected, and maybe even the soldier's mind at one point, if the technology ever gets that advanced. And you might wonder how they could create a super soldier, a cyborg soldier fusion, as they call it. Well, one of the steps of that is blood. And after DARPA started this initiative, after about 2 years, they had came out with a possible solution. It says 2 years ago, DARPA set a goal of creating a self-contained synthetic platform that can cultivate red blood cells that can stand up to violent demands of the battlefield through the process of farming or genetically engineering an organism to generate large quantities of useful substance. The DoD's R&D arm was hoping to end blood shortages on the battlefield for good. A company awarded nearly $2 million to develop this genetically engineered blood product has shipped off its first shipment to the FDA, hoping the regulators will approve it for use in trauma wards everywhere. The biotech company Arteriocyte can turn an umbilical cord into 20 units of blood in about 3 days at a cost of about $5,000 per unit. Now, I know that they use animal umbilical cords, but do they use human umbilical cords for this as well? I don't think it directly attributes that in this article. We'll just read the last paragraph. It says, if Arteriocyte can get the cost down, farm blood could replace the donated stuff within 5 years. Well, we're way beyond 5 years. Though the brass, this was from 2010, though the brass may push the FDA to fast track it if necessary, hoping the coming years will see a reduced need for large quantities of battlefield blood. But it's good to know we could churn out a vast supply in a pinch. It even says here, using stem cells to create an endless supply of blood. For decades, scientists have sought to create red blood cells in the lab, a quote unquote holy grail that some hope could ease regional blood shortages, especially for people with rare blood types. But now British researchers say they have overcome a major barrier that has plagued many scientists, creating enough red cells to fill a blood bag. Their findings are published in the journal Nature Communications. And let's read that. Let's read a little bit from that. And thank everybody for joining us again on Neighborhood News Hour. And we're sorry again for being gone for so long with no explanation. Just a second. Got a bunch of tabs open right now. It says shoot. I see it was muted. Thanks, guys. I don't know what happened there. Um, I'll just start reading this over. We'll just go back a little bit. It says, we have taken an alternative approach, immortalizing early adult erythroblasts, generating a stable line which provides a continuous supply of red cells. The immortalized cells differentiate efficiently into mature functional reticulocytes that can be isolated by filtration. Extensive characterization has not revealed any differences between these reticulocytes and in vitro cultured adult reticulocytes, functionally or at the molecular level. Importantly, no aberrant protein expression. Now back to this article by our favorite CNN. It says the concept may be a familiar one to those who have read the book The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, in which a related strain of HPV led to the production of HeLa cells, which are widely used in scientific research. These cells were taken from a cervical cancer biopsy from Lacks, who passed away in 1951, but whose cells still multiply in laboratories today. Many others have attempted to create blood in a lab using stem cells from umbilical cords and other sources, but these stem cells fizzle out and stop dividing at a certain point. In 2011, a group of French researchers transfused lab grown red blood cells, which grew from stem cells, through not phrase, Frayn's endless supply into one human. The cells function and survive normally. Frayn said that the first human trials will begin in England early this year, though they will not be using the immortal cells from her new study. Making the new cells under industry standards, Frayn said, could take at least several more years. Makes me think of the shots and how they had to, it takes so much longer to do it the safe and right way. It says a number of other prior studies have sought to create oxygen-carrying liquids without the need for blood cells, but none of them have proved to be widely usable. And there's an update on that too, ways to carry the oxygen with lipid nanoparticles. Because this article was from 2007, I believe, 2017. Yes, March. Now I wanted to read a little bit about the manufacture of the blood before I get out of this. Let's see. Okay, here it is. Bad blood. But what about the rogue red cell that slips? Because it was talking about how they, because they use cancer with some bone to, like they mimic bone marrow and use some kind of cancer to do it. Oh, I skipped over it. It says, as the red blood cells mature, they spit out the nucleus, the core that houses their DNA, giving the cells a signature round dimple shape. Frayn and her colleagues filtered those cells from the rest so the batch did not contain the active cancer genes. Frayn said that a small number of these stem cells can be found in a simple blood draw, too. there's no need to do an invasive biopsy of the bone. Since her team completed the study last year, she said they have already created 2 new immortal cell lines this way. It's a brilliant approach, and they have seemed to have solved several of the really important bottlenecks, said Dr. Robert Lanza. But what about the rogue blood cell that slips through the filter with its cancer genes still intact? Lanza calls these cells escapees. When you're dealing with such huge numbers of cells, said Lanza, there may be a few of those cells that would slip in. So we're about a tainted blood supply, I guess. A tainted artificial blood supply. We can add it to the rest of our worries. And we have another White House release. This is from Jean Pierre. Since we're on the topic of blood, and you see that they do use stem cells to make some of this blood, and we know where they get stem cells from. You know, it's not just animals. It's a statement by Press Secretary Karen Jean Pierre on proposed national abortion ban. This was 2 days ago. Today, Senator Graham introduced a national ban on abortion, which would strip away women's rights in all 50 states. This bill is wildly out of step with what Americans believe. While President Biden and Vice President Harris are focused on the historic passage of the Inflation Reduction Act to reduce the cost of prescription drugs, healthcare, and energy, and to take unprecedented action to address climate change, Republicans in Congress are focused on taking away rights for millions of women. And the president and vice president are fighting to get those back, right? President Biden and congressional Democrats are committed to restoring the protections of Roe v. Wade in the face of continued radical steps by elected Republicans to put personal health care decisions in the hands of politicians instead of women and their doctors, threatening women's health and lives. Because, you know, abortions are health care now instead of a way to opt out. And also, it contributes to cancer research. Very important to cancer research is dead babies or dead potential babies. And we're almost at the end of the hour, but I did want to, because some people might wonder how they could actually, you know, make a super soldier, right? Like the technology is not that advanced, right? But we have a report from SOAR, and this is the state of the art report. And this one is about nanotechnology applications for combat casualty care, because it's all about, you know, caring for the soldier. Now, we're not going to read this whole thing, but you could just search SOAR 2022 and you can find this whole thing. And it's funded by the Homeland Defense and Security Information Analysis Center. You know, maybe you haven't heard of that before, but there it is. I wanted to go through some of the contents. It talks about hemorrhage control, fluid resuscitation, artificial blood substitutes, platelets, oxygen carriers. So they've worked out oxygen carrying, whole blood solutions, and some of the challenges, wound management and infection. So if you read this, you can see all the state of the art in these categories as far as the military is concerned. Tissue regeneration and engineering, creating tissues, They also have neurotrauma and pain control. 'Cause we already know there's all sorts of pain and trauma associated with the horrors of war. Neuroprotection and monitoring, nanotechnology for pain management. And this came out a month ago. New targets in nanopharmaceuticals. Section 6, advanced medical monitoring, diagnosis, wearables, implantable nanosensors, stretchable sensors, and flexible electronics, fabrics, textiles. In that video earlier, we're showing you fabrics that were embedded with this nanotechnology that had nanosensors and such to give feedback or, whatever kind of information they're trying to assess. But anyway, we want to go to this section about blood. We just read a little bit from the overview. To enable a medically ready force, the U.S. Department of Defense operates a vast network of prevention, protection, and treatment support for warfighters and other DoD personnel. In fiscal year 2021, appropriations for the Defense Health Program totaled more than $37 billion, a full 10% of which went to efforts in research, development, testing, and evaluation, or RDT&E, to innovate across the spectrum of medical science, to provide DoD medical personnel with tools and techniques that go beyond traditional first responder equipment. The DoD also operates research groups like the Joint Program Committee -6 Combat Casualty Care Research Program, which develops solutions for treating combat-related trauma to optimize survival and recovery. Now we're going to go down a little bit. Now, as you can see, blood is mentioned a lot. It's also mentioned first. So you should take in consideration how important your blood is and do the things to cleanse it. Be careful what you put in your body. There was a chart I was looking. Here it is. There's a chart talking about some of the stuff they do. And it says HB encapsulated with colloidal membrane bound. But see, this is a nano capsule with all the stuff they wanted. And they just put whatever they wanted it. And these membranes are made of different polymers or synthetic nanoparticles. And they're doing all kind of research with this to find new solutions to old problems. HB encapsulated within submicron size polymeric vesicles. Now, all these terms you don't really need to understand. You just need to understand that they're creating synthetic biology. And a lot of this is like heavy metals. They're using heavy metals and introducing them into the body. Hemotech, bovine HB crosslink intramolecularly with ATP. So they're using bovine cells. So I'm not sure if you're okay with that. We know they use a lot of that in various vaccines. But I think that's enough of blood. Probably made a mess with all this bloody talk. Just remember how important your blood is. I do have a video. We'll show you a video of something they're doing with synthetic blood for soft robotics. Oh, if I can find it, here it is. It says robot fish powered by synthetic blood just keeps swimming. And this is from 2019. A liquid battery that doubles as a hydraulic fluid helps this robot swim for up to 36 hours. In a paper published in Nature this week, researchers from Cornell and the University of Pennsylvania are presenting a robotic fish that uses synthetic blood pumped through an artificial circulatory system to provide both hydraulic power for muscles and a distributed source of electrical power. The system they came up with combines the functions of hydraulic force transmission, actuation, and energy storage into a single integrated design that geometrically increases the energy density of the robot to enable operation for long durations, which sounds bloody amazing, doesn't it? Quote unquote. Let's see. Well, that was unimpressive. Well, that thing barely moved. I'm severely disappointed. Didn't even flap like a fish. Well, it's 6 o'clock now, so I think I'll go ahead and end it. But I'd like to thank you guys for sitting here with me through this, and we'll have more shows coming. Neighborhood News Hour, and we'll keep the research going. So I'll see you guys in a couple days. Peace.